Hello, my name is Vanessa Bello. I'm the founder of High 15, which is a boutique consultancy that specializes in helping businesses and leaders specifically to foster inclusive, high-performing cultures. I'm also an executive coach. I specialize in positive psychology, emotional intelligence, and cultural intelligence.
Hi, I'm Ellen Salam-Klei. I'm a writer, researcher, and model, and I'm currently training to be a psychotherapist at Regent's University and also run a men's mental health organisation called Him and His.
Hello, my name is Jamie Backshall. I'm a menswear designer. I'm currently studying my MA at Westminster University. I'm a BFC scholar, and I also teach at University of Creative Arts as a fashion technician.
I'm Bella Webb. I'm the sustainability editor at Vogue Business, and I write about fashion through the lens of sustainability, covering environmental and social justice in supply chains, legislation, and systems thinking. Welcome to the Fashion Forum podcast. This is Collective Clarity. So we're talking about mental wellness today, which is a thorny but very important topic, and it might get a bit bleak, but I think it's worth saying we're here because we're hopeful it can change and it can get better. So before we dive in, I want to just know, what does mental wellness mean to all of you? Ellen, do you want to start?
I think mental wellness is actually being content or comfortable to an extent, and having acceptance of what your current lived circumstance is, or what your lived reality is. And I think it's also, mental wellness is also self-care, what self-care means to you, and it's not in a commodified sense or what society prescribes to you.
It's not just baths and face masks.
No
and
way. Or instant infographics as well.
Yeah.
I think.
It's part of it.
Yeah,
but not
100% part of it, but I think sometimes people think that's the whole, and then because that's the easier route instead of looking at the route before a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa, what does it mean to you?
For me, my bag is the workplace, so I'll talk to that. In the workplace, mental wellness refers to the psychological health of an employee. By this, I mean that when thinking about that, we're looking at the mental, the emotional, and also the social well-being. If I was to put this simply, I would say it's thinking about what employees think, feel, and which really what drives how they behave, right? And so it refers to the context much more than anything else. But that's what I would say mental wellness is.
Jamie, what does it mean to you? What's the difference maybe between mental wellness and mental health?
Sure. So I think in terms of mental health, it's very much like the individual. It's very focused on self, and how the individual is feeling, acts, where I think mental wellness is very much the broader picture of the topic. As I say, it's coping mechanisms that we put in place or companies can put in place. It's, again, like we talk about, like this self-care topic. I think mental wellness is much more of the broader spectrum than the mental health is very individual, internalized, I believe.
So mental health is almost like the bits that you can't control.
Yeah.
Like the medicalized stuff.
Of course,
brain
and
chemistry
and
and imbalances.
There's diagnoses involved and that, whereas I feel the mental wellness those are the stuff that we can control. We can put things in place for ourselves. Other people can put things in place and structures. Whereas unfortunately, mental health, I feel that's where we kind of lose a bit of that control.
So where are we at right now when we think about mental wellness in the fashion industry? We know we've got a long way to go, but what has your experience been of working in this industry? Jamie, Ellen, whoever wants to jump in.
I mean, for me, to talk about experience, I can actually talk about like an educational point of view. So where I'm teaching, we have a lot of structures in place for students. For example, there's therapists, there's counsellors on site. Students have access to all these different programs. Whereas I feel now the gap there is there's nothing for staff. And as staff members, we can get told all these issues that our students have, and obviously we have a pastoral care for our students as well as to teach them and to educate them. So I think there needs to be structures in place where we bridge that gap, where when the staff member has been told these things and these issues by the students, it's then also they're not just left to go home with it and deal with it, and they then have to deal with things as well as what they're dealing with in their own life. They now have certain issues with what the student has then put onto them, and that's no fault of the students, don't get me wrong, because obviously that's what they're there for, but I think there needs to be them structures in place for staff members as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think safeguarding as a whole, but I think from my experience, for example, bringing out him and his, so it's an anthology of about 500 pages, so that includes about 120 different contributors. And as much as I really am appreciative of the reception, it was also a very isolating experience, especially as a 24-year-old. And in hindsight, there wasn't much safeguarding when working with brands and having to almost perform what my experience and what my current lived experience as a carer for a twin brother who has psychosis, because this mental health and mental wellness to an extent is glamorized. It's a story. And if people can't relate to that on the nitty gritty dirty parts of it, you know, they can only relate to the exhibition or the talk, or when it's digestible and palatable for them. I think I was left feeling very empty and very disregarded at times. And also the expectation of being, I would say, mental health advocate, not mental health activist, because I think there's so much pressure to live up to an expectation of what people need of you, and not much of what is for you, you know?
And especially if you're dealing with your own mental health struggles as well, you've already got so much pressure just to operate at what people consider like a normal level, whatever the heck that means.
Yeah.
But then to have the added pressure of having to perform it is just...
I think on a talent side of things, I think a lot of lived experiences, whether that is from my experience of being a queer person or being a person of colour, being a woman, and then having my own lived experience where it's my normal. So I did not have any of those issues or any of those existential crises whilst making the book and whilst relating and sharing vulnerability with the contributors of the book. But then when it extended to being interviewed, for example, I had some really great interviews that really would not touch a nerve, but would make me really rethink about how I thought of myself, how I could improve my own mental wellness, you know, or the collective mental wellness like you were talking about. But then there was also immense disregard for how important it was to really have safety in the conversation, even in terms of language, you know. And I use, for example, I feel like I have agency of saying it's dirty. There are aspects of the mental health system that are atrocious, but people don't want to, they shy away from that side, but they want you to talk about it in a way that is almost like it's a story, there's drama to it, you know, without actually looking at the aftermath of that. So I think I had to have the responsibility to actually think, okay, now I have to have breaks and not really work also on the timeline of fashion, where when things are in fashion, when mental health is in fashion, when men's mental health, when I brought that out, it wasn't really a conversation being had. So there was immense pressure to fill all these gaps. And, you know, also I'm speaking in a vacuum because there are 1,000,001 other people that are doing the same thing, if not more, and have been like devoting their whole lives' work to this, and they're not being afforded the same platform, you know? So I think it's like the takeaway for me was balance on all levels. Yeah.
I think there's a really interesting point in there about the way that fashion treats marginalized identities, marginalized experiences. The sort of commodification of self is a real issue in fashion. And if we're thinking about why mental health maybe is so difficult to deal with in this industry in particular, I think we do have to acknowledge that kind of capitalist paradigm that we're existing in within fashion, that it does encourage you to commodify everything. And I think maybe, Jamie, you can speak to this a little bit from the design perspective, because I think it's something that if you're starting your own brand, you really have to like make yourself marketable. What impact does that have on you from a sort of mental health perspective, having to like share so much of yourself in a work context?
I think for me, that's kind of like flip to that is like, I'm quite lucky where my work, I'm quite open. I think that's the area of myself that I feel I can express myself, and that's kind of like an outlet for me, and like my work would be an outlet. So my MA collection is based upon like me growing up within academy football and the pressures of academy football and almost fitting into this masculine world, but then being told to like man up and grow up too fast, and then when you have your dream shattered at such a young age, it's like, okay, now you have to go and deal with all of that. And at the time there was so much going on externally to that, but where I was with the teams I was with, they don't identify that. It's just, oh, he's not playing well, he's not good enough, you're not good enough, like you're moved on, you know? So I think the experiences I've had, it's actually now my work as a designer is my outlet to that, and which is why I think it's so important for me from the journey that I've been on and the experiences I've had, that I actually use my voice to kind of shed light on that, if that makes sense. So yeah, I use it as an outlet, most definitely.
Vanessa, I want to come to you now, because I think this idea of self-expression in fashion is a fascinating one, and I think there are a lot of people that come into the industry seeking that sense of belonging, but belonging is a really delicate mix, right? It's really hard to actually get right in a company setting. What does that look like in practice? What are we maybe misunderstanding about belonging?
So much, sorry. I need to mind myself. So much. First, I think language. So I would love if in this podcast we didn't say marginalized, because actually the right word is overlooked, right? It's people who are at different intersections that are not considered, right? So under-considered or overlooked. Maybe that already gives us a perspective. Belonging, I think there is a misunderstanding about what is belonging. Belonging is about creating or existing in an environment where we can be our authentic selves. And I think people get this a little bit twisted, because there is a big difference between being our authentic selves and being our full self. And as a consultant, as a coach, I always say to clients, do not bring your full self to a work environment, right? Whether you're a model, whether you are a designer, whether you are more on the business side of fashion, do not bring your full self, because this is not rewarded, right? So that's number one. Two, there's different stages to belonging. The first one is, so there's 5 key stages actually to belonging. One, do I feel welcome, right? And when we say, do I feel welcome, the I is the authentic I, i.e. my story, my background, my influences, my what got me to be in fashion in the first place, for example. Then there is this idea of, do I feel seen, valued, respected for who I am? And also, more importantly, for what I contribute or could contribute. Because when you are overlooked, right, and as in your identity, and actually, by the way, when I say overlooked, it is not only for, Black people, women, Asian people, queer people, etc., right? White men, heterosexual, cisgender can also be overlooked. For example, for this, even your story about football, like that is something that you could be like, wow, that's not for me. And do you see what I mean? So it's whatever puts you on a out, right, rather than an in. And so can you feel valued, seen, and respected for what you could contribute? And then there's many more stages where then we get to how committed can I truly be here? And that's the piece that is just before belonging. A lot of companies do not understand that actually it is on them. When I say companies, I mean senior leaders. It's on them to really start to understand the psychological steps that enable anybody else to feel that they can think in an inclusive manner, that they can feel part of this, and that they can really therefore participate and contribute to betterment, right? And I think that's what is misunderstood at the moment. Fashion for me, and I love fashion, right? I love the industry. I really, truly love it. But I have to say, as the oldest member on the podcast, I also have a love and hate relationship with it, because I believe that we are lying somehow. There is a big disconnect between what fashion stands for to the average customer, which is the self-expression, which is the dream, which is the escapism, all of that. And there is the reality, right? And if I'm French, right, but I'll say the word reality as an English person, like reality. Reality, and it's that reality of the behind the scene, which we're talking about today, and it's so beautiful that we get to do this, today.
Could I, because you raised like a super interesting point about...
Thank you.
You're welcome. About not fully turning up.
Yeah.
Can we like talk about that? Because
Yeah.
I feel, is there like a thing where, say for example, the hierarchy or whatnot, would that then affect somebody's chance of getting a certain role, or if they didn't turn up as their full self? I just think that's super interesting.
I see what you mean. I advise clients not to bring their full self, because when at the beginning, we talked about what is mental wellness. Yeah. Something that I think we agree on is we're not there yet, fully. And so until we will have workplaces in the fashion industry where we talk about mental wellness. We are constructing, right? We initiate things to create a mentally well environment. Then we can bring our full self. But because we're not there yet, I say, it's up to the 80%. Keep some for yourself. Yeah.
I would say it's also, how I read it, is protection. And that's why I speak now with hindsight, why I feel like I've developed that protection and why I'm here. Because I, again, like you, I love the fashion industry. I love that we can have these conversations, but in terms of it's not up to the individual. You have to manage your own expectations so that you don't blame yourself for what's happening to you. You don't blame yourself for how you're perceived, because it's not up to you for the level at which you're seen. That's their journey. And that's their journey outside of work in their home lives. Because a lot of what you were saying, I'm like, this isn't actually about the industry. This is about who people are intrinsically, how they've been raised, what their environment is, and what their environment continues to be. Yeah. And if the workforce, for example, behind the scenes, isn't something that reflects learning for them as well, that they're not going to see that as essential. Because why would I learn for 2 or 3 people in the office?
Right. And it's learning and growth. And that's what I don't see enough of, right? And I guess that's why I do what I do. But it's, I've answered your question.
Absolutely, more than. I just wanted to mention, because I think it's relevant to something you were saying earlier about the dream. And actually, that's a really interesting word. Jamie, you used it as well earlier when you were talking about football. You talked about your dreams being shattered and the effect that had on you. Last year, we ran a survey of like 700 people on Vogue Business, and it was interviewing fashion professionals about their experience of the industry. So what it takes to achieve a certain level of success, but also what it takes to be happy at that level of success. And one of the things that we found was that the lifestyle that fashion encourages, the long hours, the late nights, the intense travel, the blurring of professional and personal boundaries, not necessarily having friendships outside of fashion or hobbies outside of fashion because you don't have time, your time is not yours to control. All of these things contribute to poor mental health. And so, when we're talking about protection, we also need to consider the environment that we're putting people into when we put them into the fashion industry and what that does to people, what kind of behaviors that incentivizes, what kind of protection, layers of protection that disincentivizes and makes really difficult. We were talking earlier about having friends outside of the fashion industry and what that does for your mental health. Can you talk a bit about that, like, sense of perspective? And
I think it's immensely grounding because you're able to see that what your normal isn't everyone else's normal, because there's a lot that is normalized in the fashion industry, toxic or not toxic. But these long work hours, the, you know, burnout again is glamorized. You know, it's almost like water cooler chat. Yeah, oh my God, I'm knackered, but that's not normal to have slept that little over a week and to be going, fair enough, all for enjoyment if you want to party. But there is also a level of obligation with parties and events and everything that comes with networking, that you then end up compromising on your actual, what self-care is being with belonging outside of the industry, you know, grounding forces with family, friends, even just space by yourself. It's also space, you know. Fashion weeks, for example, people that have to go to every single fashion week, and I'm talking outside of being a model, I'm lucky that I never actually did the full every single week. Yeah, but that's because I chose not to. I saw how it destroyed certain models, and that was their whole life. And then they're having their birthday on the road and they're missing really important events that now they regret, you know, because you can't say no. To say no is you don't take this seriously or it's not important. But in any other job, I know that there's other very fast-paced jobs that require that demand. But I'm watching, for example, my parents who work in international development. They work in very crucial roles, and they can say no. You know, but why is it in fashion we feel like it's so linked to our own self-worth, even to like how important are you going to be in this role if you aren't putting your all, you're not sacrificing yourself, you're not becoming a martyr.
Was it hard to get to a stage, or was it like you clearly put in a lot of self-work to get to a stage where you feel confident and able to say no and to set boundaries, you know what I mean? Because a lot of people, I feel, where they'll be like, oh, but that's going to jeopardize me doing this, or oh my God, they're going to think this of me, so no, I have to do this because then it will get me here, you know what I mean? So
I had an easier route because I was a full-time carer.
Okay.
So I didn't have to think about me, and I didn't have to, I think it's actually harder when you don't have a real responsibility. Like it's the same way, like if you didn't have kids, like I had an easy route, as in like, from the jump, I was like, and when I entered modelling because I got fired from a catering job and I was still studying English and French at Warwick. So it was never a huge priority, but that made then people think that I didn't value what I was doing.
Yeah.
And actually I put my all into it, but my all of what I had capacity for, you know? But that's also, I think, so hard for people to do. I think it's a huge journey. And I think after COVID, it rejigged certain people's thoughts, because they were like, I've seen everything crash and burn around me. Like, is this essential? Yeah. Is this as essential? Is this as important as I'm making it? Is that as important as my mental health at the end of the day? Yeah. You know, mental health is if your mental health isn't good, everything's gone.
Yeah, you can't show up for anything.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I think that there's a certain arrogance in the industry where people think that they can run on empty and be fine, and then the aftermath is horrific.
I think it's also worth talking, though, about the type of roles that people tend to do in fashion, because I think that instability that comes from freelancing also has a massive role to play. You know, if you're constantly having to sell yourself and prove that you're the best of 30 freelancers that could do this job, that heightens that pressure that you have to perform, you have to be on your game, you can't talk about your mental health, you can't show weakness, you can't be seen as like difficult to work with, you know? There's this like culture that comes from the very like structural way that these jobs are set up.
No, it's a luxury to be able to say no. You were saying something earlier about this.
Yeah, it is a luxury, and I think if we go back to the and I think what you're touching on is the infrastructure that again needs to change. It's very precarious for a lot of people. And there is that, when we think about diversity, inclusion, belonging, there is this I always think, you know, talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. And in some industries, to your point, there are more opportunities. you know, and I guess that's a question that we must ask ourselves. What are the true opportunities in the fashion industry now and beyond, right? And I don't see that question being asked enough, to be honest with you. And if again we were asking that question and many other pertinent questions, then maybe the conversations, the answers, the structures will then morph, evolve, change in order to cater to atypical stories. And when I say atypical, maybe not non-standard, you know, stories and experiences. And that's something. But to your point, the power of saying no with grace, you know, because being difficult. Well, to be honest, I don't think there is an issue in being seen. I've been seen. You know, people call me a troublemaker all the time, so whatever. But I do prefer disruptor, though. But I do think that it comes with a sense of privilege. And we have to acknowledge that, right? Walking away from something is not given to everybody, because of that precarity. And so, for me, there is a piece where I'm always thinking, what is our conscious, this is called, the word collective is very present in the title. And so what is our conscious, collective conscience in French, you know? What is that collective conscience that we have to take care of our industry? And I think that is another question that I would love to explore. Do you see what I mean? Or for more people to explore.
Okay, so let's throw it open. We've spoken about some of the challenges, but if we're taking this as a sort of dream space, if we're thinking about the ideal state we want to work towards, what does that look like for mental wellness in the fashion industry? What's the goal?
I think for me it starts with openness and kindness, you know, and understanding, and being able to express feelings in a safe space where it's not a sign of weakness. I think that's super important, and this goes for all levels, you know, from, I say bottom, but you know, from right to the top, where it's okay to feel how you feel, you know. I think we see it time and time again, like with either, like, for example, new creative directors that go in and they show one collection, and then there's almost hate and like monstrosities on social media and whatnot, and you think, okay, at the end of the day, and I'm not taking away from anyone's jobs because it's something I'm so passionate about and I love, but I have to remind myself this, and I've been reminded of this, and I remind students of this. It's like, it's just clothes, you know, like we're just either making clothes or designing clothes. Like, that perspective has really helped me so much. But I think for what, like, for example, the creative director roles, and then they get demonized, like, these are human beings as well, and I don't think it's acceptable for the hate and abuse that they get just by putting out, like, if it's a bad collection. I mean, fashion's all perspective as well, isn't it? It's subjective, yeah, it's an opinion. So, yeah, I think for me it's like openness, and being safe to talk about how you feel.
What else?
For me, it's about more than two things, but I'll talk about two things. Stress management. Yeah. And I think first, understanding of what really stress is. How does it manifest in the body? How does it manifest in behaviors? People are not difficult because they want to be difficult, right? You know, yes, you've got people who have massive egos. You've got people who are, you know, incredibly, not necessarily, I think, when you get to the top of such an industry, you operate in such a small, close-knit, you know, like you don't get a lot of feedback also. And this is why sometimes social media gets a bit like, oh my gosh, because all of a sudden you've opened the feedback valves, you know, when actually there is this piece around, you know, we love what you do when there is this encouragement. But I do think that stress management is very important. Understanding what stress is, how does it manifest, and what can we do in order to minimize it or keep it under control. And then there is another piece which, to your point, is around creating community in the fashion industry, and in all structures. And when we talk about community, that comes with kindness, compassion, vulnerability, everyday leadership, connection. You know, it comes with, you carry yourself very differently. And so that understanding, I think, of those two key things could really help us to, you know, again, better this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, brilliant, both of you. Because for me, it's, where care is not performative, where there is actual real care, I can feel the empathy. It's not, you know, empty words, there's actually action there behind, and there's also space for mistakes, to be human, you know? Yeah. The level of perfectionism that people uphold in this industry on all levels, and you can see it from beauty standards. So you don't have to be a model, you can literally work in an office and feel those pressures. I think just allowing someone to be them, just to be, and then I think that will open up, there's so much more possibility for someone to, when they're truly themselves. And again, still to an extent, because in all facets of life and society, you have to still preserve and have protection. But the way that I've seen people flourish when they're in an environment that actually fosters their growth, that will do more for them as well. And that's what the industry also, I think, needs to see and can see also. And when community also isn't commodified, because it's like as much as like I've not been in the industry as long as you, I've watched community get commodified, and I've watched my friends they've been forced to commodify their own culture and their own community. And it's sad because you feel icky, you know, but you have to, because you don't have the luxury to stop, and you also want to see your dream fulfilled. And it's almost to work within until you can work without, you know, but whilst we're working within, how can we make it easier? You know, and I think especially for the younger generation coming up, I'm like, for example, I'll connect the dots. If I have contacts and I feel like it would help you, why not connect the dots? And they're 100%. So surprised. And it makes me so sad, because the whole reason I'm in the position where I am is because I've had support from the elders, you know, and it's been so vital for my own growth. And I've had, that's where my care has come from, you know, sitting in the smoking area being like, this was so horrible. How do I it was all to do with me, and them helping me reassess, you know, it's not about you. It's about the infrastructure. It's about things larger than you. You know, it's not on a micro level, it's a macro level.
Yeah.
It's a macro.
Isn't it funny though, we always internalize and think it is an us issue, you know?
And let's be honest, sometimes it is.
Of course.
Not necessarily for us.
Of course.
Not necessarily for us here, but sometimes it is. And I think but that piece around that self-actualization, this idea of, okay, what is my own contribution? And I go back to this idea of leadership. Leadership for me is how do we influence, inspire, and guide others to achieve a goal? And so I would love for people to start to think much more about who can I influence, what can I influence, who can I inspire, and what is that goal that I want to guide people towards? If we do that, listen to me, we would be having a very completely different conversations, isn't it?
I'm going to be hiring you to coach me.
Yeah, same. I'm already
I'm sold.
Yeah.
Anytime, a little bit of spice mindset.
But it's such an important point, because I think, you know, these are macro issues. They are kind of structural, systemic issues to an extent. But culture is also about just how people relate to each other. And we can really start to change things just by relating differently between ourselves. I do want to just quickly talk, though, about the root cause of all of this, because I think it's one thing to talk about what we can change and what the utopian vision is. But if we don't shift the underlying motives of the industry, there's a limit on our success there. And like, just coming from a sustainability perspective, it's very clear from my mind that overproduction is a huge part of all of this. Like, we are just going at such an insane pace that the planet can't keep up with, but people also cannot keep up with. Part of the reason that we feel this pressure to be productive all of the time, to not rest, to not look after ourselves, is because of that overproduction piece, because this industry is just hurtling towards climate, societal breakdown. So I feel like there's something in that as well, that we need to really kind of reassess what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if we shift those drivers, maybe we have a better chance.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, the whole Curvilicious body that I have. There needs to be, again, another conversation around slow productivity in our industry, which I think we don't have enough. We do have it from a sustainability perspective, yet the structures, again, we're not thinking about what does this mean, to what we are teaching, how we are showing up, how we are connecting to a product. What is in marketing, my background, years ago was in marketing. What is the story that we tell about the industry, about the product, etc.? And I think slow productivity is something that's very important. I used to be a trend forecaster, and we looked at a trend at the time, which was boredom. The fact that creativity comes in boredom, slowing down, it can actually accelerate, so much betterment, but we don't do it because the pace is more. And the overproductivity, to your point, is a piece, really fits to this. Again, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. If I don't go to that party, if I don't network here, if I don't do that, then I lose. It's a win or lose. There's
like
no
a
in between.
scarcity mindset.
Yeah, there's no in between.
And people can't see the long game. They can't see that they have such value in their longevity and that they need to preserve that. And so, for example, me taking a hiatus, for example, from him and his, because of I was forced to, from burnout, to get back on the road, as to say, was so hard because I'd internalized like, oh no, I fell off, and people then would be like, oh, when's your next event? But I was doing like 6 events a month on my ones, just me. So it's like, now with perspective, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be training to be a psychotherapist at Regents in a very great institution, but then also dealing with that. Now with perspective, I can be like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to do this book way slower than the last one. The last one I just boom, 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 and it was almost like a sense of distraction or escapism for what I was living in then. There was urgency was all around me. But now when I'm actually learning to slow down, I'm putting that into all areas of my life, and I can see growth. I can see how I show up with my clients, So I couldn't be the same person as I was and still have the capacity to pour into all of my clients, because I have to pour into myself first. And I think people don't see that in the industry because I think sometimes they don't value the human nature of how much they need to recharge their batteries, and then it's not necessarily just a social battery. They need to recharge it on all levels and be able to be not even given, but they have to be able to take that space, and they have to have agency in asking for that space, and without that being rest is vilified,
I see this in from a design perspective. I think there has been some designers where they've now turned around and saying, I'm not showing on schedule, because to show on schedule every single time, that fast pace where sometimes then you lose kind of an integrity of how you're designing, because you have to keep up with all this pace, the momentum, and then for buyers, and then for this, it's an ever-going cycle, whereas actually some work that has been produced where designers have come off schedule and then just really gone into taking a break for themselves, but also what is it they want to produce and what is their meaning and what we've been speaking about. And I feel like some incredible work has come from actually taking a step back and having the bravery to be like, do you know what? I am going to slow things down. I'm going to take myself out and then go again. And I think that's super important. And it's quite inspiring to see big designers actually doing that now. Whereas, it's quite, for me going into that, it's like, okay, this can actually happen, and it's okay to do that, and you're not a failure if you don't show every single season and your clothes might not sell or whatnot, you know what I mean? So it is good to be seeing that from a design perspective.
We could keep talking forever, but I think we probably have to wrap up soon. Already, I know.
Just get into it.
Before we do though, if you could each just share one message, if there's someone listening to this who is struggling with their mental health, who doesn't have that infrastructure of mental wellness around them, like what would be your kind of parting message to them?
I would say, as wishy-washy as it sounds, to remember the power that you have within you, because you have agency over yourself. Anywhere or any person you go to for help is only going to help you unlock what you already have within you. So it's really just about remembering your strength, and also understanding there is support. There is always support. And that might not necessarily be through speaking, because speaking isn't what works for everyone, but there is support, and I think it is taking that first step and reaching out. Would also say literally give him his DM, because I do link people up with therapists, and that's how a lot of people have. Yeah, I mean it's not that taxing on the other person. It's like, for example, it's my job. It's my job. So if I can, I think it's people feeling like they're a burden, and that's the real blocker. When actually it's like no time out of my day, and it's all about linking. And yeah, I think that it's just that you always have a support system, even if it doesn't feel like that.
I'm talking to the camera.
Yeah.
You are loved. We see you, at least us. We see you. You are valued. Keep dreaming. The industry will change. It will catch on. Your now is not your always, or what will not always be maybe bleak or doom and gloom. Believe in yourself, but indeed find community. And find that strength within yourself to keep going, and know again that you are not alone, right? You are not alone. And again, mental wellness will become a bigger topic in the industry, so believe, and you will achieve.
Period.
I mean, how can I go after that?
Come on.
No, I think for me, it's okay to feel how you feel, you know, and it's not this like alien thing to feel this way, but be patient, be kind, even though if you feel a certain way and you can turn up and every morning you think, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to feel like this. If you're kind and you show up and you're patient, and things will get better. So yeah, I'll leave it as that before it gets emotional.
Oh, emotional. We want some tears.
No.
Amazing. I will just share one thing from my therapist that has helped me, and it's really cliche, but it does the trick. Emotions pass. Like, think of it like the weather, you know? You don't kind of look at the rain out the window and think that it's going to rain forever. You kind of trust that there will be sunshine again, and your emotions are exactly the same. Sometimes you feel like you've healed and then you spiral again, and sometimes it's the opposite. You spiral and you don't think the sun will ever come, and then suddenly you feel okay. It's all cyclical, so hang in there. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you for your openness and your vulnerability, and yeah, this is a great chat.
It was.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Camera.
Yeah. No, the first of many of these conversations.